think the biggest impact that we'll see in the next 3 years for sure is the introduction of HTS satellites from a couple perspectives. One, the amount of bandwidth that you're going to see. Two, I think the types of services that you can deploy on an HTS satellite, the kind of infrastructure that you can build based on spot beam orientation, how you can supply that capacity and where you can supply that capacity. I think over the next 2 to 3 years, that's going to be by far the biggest impact that we'll see in our industry. I think how that then allows competition with terrestrial broadband or wireless broadband is going to also be kind of an interesting piece. Is it going to be broadly based or in particular regions? So I think that's the next 2 to 3 years. I think 3 to 5 plus years, I think the biggest innovations that we'll see will be in the area of small sats, non-geo orbit satellites, some of the things that we're seeing now from both technology innovation standpoint, what it means to the satellites, even geo-based satellites, but also the kind of services that are going to get deployed. So I think that the first 2 to 3 years, HTS and HTS services that you can offer are going to be a huge impact for us. I think, let's say 2 to 5 years out, it's going to be these constellations that we're just now seeing in non-geo orbit that will have the most substantial impact. And the impact will be not just the service that they offer, but what they're going to do to the technology in terms of cost effectiveness, in terms of technological reach, in terms of innovation for how you set up ground systems and how you deliver service. In the first piece, I think that the ability to steer bandwidth, to time bandwidth, to allow customers to choose or operators to choose how to deliver a service and how much bandwidth I can deliver a service on a particular point is pretty revolutionary. And we used to just set up a transponder and a signal and broadcast it, and what we were doing is broadcasting, real-time TV and events. There's a certain drumbeat and way that you managed and operated and deployed. I think the fact that you now can or should be able to change the type of service that you deliver, change the bandwidth that you can deliver, start thinking in terms of selling megabits, not megahertz, start thinking in terms of selling service, not technology. I think that changes the mix. It makes us really a little more like the telecommunications industry has been historically, or certainly over the last 5 or 10 years, where the issue isn't selling how much capacity do I have, it's tailoring that capacity for a service that I deploy. I think when we look at the whole small sat configurations or global configurations and non-geo based, I think that the opportunity there is really to potentially deliver worldwide broadband, which again gives you a whole new set of services that today you really only did either wireless or wireline. Tomorrow, the fact that you could either mix or match or deliver that service out in space is pretty substantial, and I think it affects. We'll see big reductions in terms of the cost per megahertz and then cost per megabits. I think that'll have a that'll create a lot of stress in the industry, but I think that that will also enable a whole new set of applications. I think right now everybody's concerned about how much bandwidth is going to be available with the coming HTS satellites and then the coming constellations. The one thing that has been historically true is that if the more chip processing power you have, there's always applications that suck up that processing power. The more bandwidth that we have, there's always applications that suck up that bandwidth. And people forget in the 90s we were having this exact conversation in the wireline area where everybody thought there's so much dark fiber, there's so much fiber in the ground, who could ever use the amount of bandwidth that we have? There's no way that the telco industry is going to recover from that. Well, now streaming video later, gaming later, we're in a completely different world. So I think that the enablement of cheaper, more directable, more steerable bandwidth that's more ubiquitous and can service certain segments of the market, like mobile markets, in a better way, will provide a whole new set of application, so a whole new set of infrastructure, so that people who are providing the applications can do things that we haven't necessarily thought of today. I mean, nobody thought of the bandwidth that gets sucked up on a Netflix in the wireline world. Who would have thought of Google and Google Maps or YouTube or Yelp or any of the geo-sensitive applications that exist today, and what are those going to be whenever we actually have available bandwidth in places we don't have it today. As our traditional customer and will be historically as the satellite operator, as they start enabling service and become more of a service provider and service operator, we see our market opening up to their customers and their customers' customers. As we help them enable that next generation of service, it drives us to build products to help that enablement. How do we help our operators become a service provider? How do we help them drive the costs of delivering a service to the customer, to their customers? How do we help, what would be to us would be a non-traditional, non-typical customer actually manage or deliver or deploy a service? So somebody who's using somebody who's taking a satellite bandwidth and reselling it, to somebody who's actually using that bandwidth in some operational way. So down to the actual consumer itself. Now, the consumer may be just one step further than our vision is right now, but we can see it coming. Certainly, the customer who services the consumer and the customer who services the customer who services the consumer is a big part of where we want to move our product lines, which then forces us to start thinking about how do we get to how do we help deploy and manage millions of devices from the infrastructure products that we produce, as opposed to only teleports and only hubs. So how that fits to our world is really, we believe that the marketplace will open up, and I suppose the good news is that all we have to do is look at the wireless world and the wireline world and use that as a roadmap for what happens when bandwidth comes down, bandwidth pricing comes down, what happens when the service quality of the bandwidth goes up, what happens when you're able to deploy bigger and broader band services over a network. The market expands, and in some cases expands dramatically. So it's finding those users and the customers of those users is where we see the market really expanding for us. In addition to helping our historic customers, which is the satellite operators and the network operators who sell the bandwidth. So we provide a lot of the infrastructure support end-to-end, where we focus on how do we make sure the signal is performing correctly, how do we make sure that the signal is assured, it's not being jammed, it's not managed, how do we manage the ground infrastructure, how do we manage the network. All of those things help our customers deliver service cost effectively and deliver service in regions where maybe they couldn't have delivered it before. I think if you take a step up from our perspective, and again, we saw this in the wireless world, and we see it in the IT world, is the more some of the technology innovation that we've seen in other areas bleeds into our space, the more we're going to be able to cost effectively deliver broader based solutions. So get into the millions of users, not tens of thousands of users. So ideas like, how do you bring IT type technology so you're not dealing with everything being specialized, but you're dealing with software and virtualized software managed in cloud-based applications. Technology oriented, but that certainly allows you to deliver and deploy very differently than we've historically done with kind of our stovepipe systems and our stovepipe regions. I think on the ground side, the ability to, and it's always been the challenge of every satellite, every operator, every ground system has a different waveform, a different approach to it. I think that, and we saw this, the competition gets higher, but the more standard that you get with some of the waveforms, the more the tide rises. And one of the things that's non-technical that you'd like to see, or we'd like to see, is a little more of that standardization on the waveform for the devices themselves, because we do think that the rising tide would benefit everybody in that market space, and so that instead of having a device with a satellite with a particular area, something that was a little more akin to what we see in the mobile world, which is less technology-based, more business model-based, I think would change, especially when we're looking at the kind of footprints that we think we could get with HTS and the large-scale constellations, large-scale non-geo constellations. So how you think about your ground-based assets, I think, is going to be a big, big piece in terms of how broad we can really grow our marketplace. So that's what we would like to see.